Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sabrina Kofer, and on behalf of Choice and ACRL, I'd like to welcome you to today's program, Teaching with Government Documents from the National Archives, UK, which is sponsored by AM. This session is one in a series of sponsored webinars from Choice and ACRL that addresses new ideas and developments of interest to the academic library community. Now I'll just put a couple links in the chat for where you can register for upcoming webinars or watch previous webinar recordings. Before we get started, I'd like to point out just a few features of the webinar software. All attendees who join the presentation are automatically muted and your cameras are off, so don't worry about generating any noise or feedback. We've got that taken care of for you. In the main area of the screen, you can follow along with the presentation materials. To adjust the size of the slides or video, you can use the divider in the middle of the screen to slide the sizes to your liking. We are using the Q&A feature today. Please use it to ask questions of our speakers or to share any comments. We'll answer as many questions as we have time for at the end of the presentation, so please do type your questions into the Q&A module as they occur to you. Also, there is closed captioning available for today's session. To toggle the automated captions on or off, please use the CC button on the bottom right corner of your screen. Last, please note that we are recording today's program, and everyone who registered should receive a follow-up email with a link to the archive version. And with that, we're ready to get started. So I will hand it over to the speakers to introduce themselves.
So hi everybody, my name is Dr. Matt Graham and I'm a senior lecturer in African history at the University of Dundee.
Hello everyone, my name is Nick Jackson and I am a senior editor with AM and I have particular responsibility for the AM Archives Direct series.
Hello everyone, I'm Alex Barr. I am an assistant editor here at AM, and in particular I was project lead on one of our newest AM Archives Direct releases, Apartheid South Africa, Section 4, 1981 to 1988, Resistance, Sanctions and Reform, which are published in April 2024.
Right, hello, thank you everyone. You can see the agenda for today's webinar in front of you at the moment, and I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes introducing AM Archives Direct as a series before passing on to Alex, who is then going to talk about, as he says, Apartheid South Africa more specifically. I was just trying to make the slide go forwards. Can I do that? There we are. Right, so yes, what is AM Archives Direct? It is the suite of resources AM publish, which consists exclusively of British government material from the National Archives in Kew in West London, and it focuses on 19th and 20th century international relations from, of course, a British perspective. So this material consists in the largest part of government correspondence, so representatives of the British government, both in Britain and at diplomatic and administrative posts all over the world, writing to each other. But there are also plentiful reports, tables of statistics, statistical information of all kinds, published booklets and other ephemera, formal diplomatic dispatches and digests, newspaper cuttings, sometimes whole newspapers actually, maps, basically everything kept by government departments pertaining to matters that they've had an interest in. And if you have any familiarity with material from the National Archives, you'll know that the number of types of thing that British governments over the years have had an interest in is almost unlimited. So this material is constituted of a number of file classes from the National Archives, which varies depending on the collection we're talking about, but which is concentrated on files from the Foreign Office and its various predecessors, including the Colonial Office and the Dominions Office. There are also plentiful files from the Prime Minister's Office and small numbers from other classes here and there. But as far as possible, we digitize complete runs of documents in full. There are occasional gaps where documents they're either closed, so they're not actually publicly available. They've been retained by the department that produced them, or occasionally there are losses. Files haven't made it to the National Archives for whatever reason, though they should have done. But with the exception of these occasional gaps, we digitize everything which so we aim to allow the full official record to be presented without editorial curation, to give the richest possible avenues for research. And I can confidently say I think that this content offers an unparalleled view, both for researchers and for teachers. And Matt is going to talk in a bit about his teaching using Archives Direct. An unparalleled view of the UK's interactions and relations with foreign and colonial governments across, at present, Asia, Africa, the Americas, and the Middle East are the areas that Archives Direct concentrates on, although we are adding content periodically. At the moment, there are 14 Archives Direct collections, with more in the pipeline, as I say, and also plans to add more sections to existing collections. So what Alex is going to talk about in a moment is an addition to the existing Apartheid South Africa collection covering the early 1980s. We've also very recently released, a couple of weeks ago, an addition to the conflict in Indochina resource. So that is Foreign Office files on Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. And we've added the period 1964 to 79. And I'm going to show you a few screenshots from that in a moment. And currently, as a whole, so all of Archives Direct, that comes to just over 34,000 documents and about 4.2 million digitized images. Examples of other collections in the series include Foreign Office files on India and on China, and the Foreign Office series of confidential print digests. So those are printed and published collections of the most significant and important material from the general correspondence, which were printed up and then circulated to British posts all over the world. And we have those from Africa, North and South America, and the Middle East. Archives Direct has recently been migrated to our new Quartex software platform, which adds better, more modern functionality and accessibility standards. It's also been, in doing so, it's been split up. It used to be a single site, which obviously was growing and growing and growing. It's now been split into one site per collection. But to complement that, we've added a new all Archives Direct federated searching tool. So that will enable, or does enable, browsing and searching of all Archives Direct sites together, which I will also show you in a moment. So I promised you a look at conflict in Indochina, which this is the homepage. So as I say, this is the most recent Archives Direct release, or rather the second section of this was 1965 to 79. So anyone familiar with any of the old, well, with the old Archives Direct site will see a lot here that they have seen before. This is just the document list of, or the top of the document list of conflict in Indochina. The key to the findability in these documents, as you'll have seen from one of the slides at the beginning, is the presence of searchable OCR or HTR transcripts attached to every document, plus automatically generated topical metadata on people, places, and general topics, which have been generated from the transcripts. So if I just progress forward a slide, this is an example of one of those documents in the list you've just seen. You can see the summary metadata next to the image viewer there. And if you were on the site, you could scroll down. I can't scroll down, so I'll go to the next slide. And you can see the document details below, which contains, you've got places and topics metadata. For this particular document, this is actually a very short document. It's only about 8 pages. So there haven't, the process hasn't picked up any people, but most documents will have those three metadata fields. Also, everything is searchable. As I say, it's all there are transcripts for every document. So I did a search for Edward Heath, you can see in the top left there, who was British Prime Minister in the early 70s, and there are 47 documents mentioning him in Indochina. If I just show you again the document details of one of those, you can see the search term is highlighted in the metadata summary and in the original image as well. And if you used the hits buttons along the top, those red buttons, you can browse forwards through the images in that document which have hits in. Again, going down to what would be the lower half of this page, if this was on the site, it will give you snippets from all of the images which have Edward Heath, hit for Edward Heath in them, and you can, if this was the site, you could click through to each full image from those snippets. I also promised you a look at the Archives Direct Federated Search page. So this is a new addition to the suite, having had the single site split up per collection. This is a tool which allows you to search and browse the entire Archives Direct suite from one place. So you can see here, these are all the products currently in Archives Direct. This is split up by section, so all the sections are individually purchasable. So you can see that Apartheid South Africa has 4 sections, 81 to 88. In the second row there is what Alex will be talking about shortly. And this view is filterable by, for example, region. So if you're interested in the Middle East, then there are 4 products pertaining to the Middle East. You've got the three sections of Foreign Office files, and then you've got the confidential print Middle East that I was mentioned briefly earlier. And as I say, everything is searchable. So I did a search for Reagan. I was talking about politicians. So you can see the left-hand filter column there, split up by collection, which collections have hits for Reagan in. He was, of course, US president in the 80s. So Apartheid South Africa, 81 to 88, has by far the most hits for Reagan, but you can see he pops up in various, or at least somebody called Reagan pops up in various other resources. Yeah, and if you click on any of those documents in the list, modal will pop up, giving you some selected metadata for that document. You can see the people, places, and topics for that one. And if you clicked View Document at the top next to the image, then that will take you through directly to the site in question that one is in, which in this case is Apartheid South Africa. Which seems like a good place to hand over to Alex, who is going to talk about that a bit more.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, so I'm going to start off by introducing the kind of broader Archives Direct Apartheid South Africa collection, and then dive into that newest module that we published just last month. So Apartheid South Africa is one of our longest standing collections within AM Archives Direct. So first published in 3 sections between 2014 and 2015. And these first 3 sections covered the years from the election of the National Party and the initial implementation of apartheid policies in 1948 through to 1980. And after that very long hiatus since 2015, we're now returning to the collection to expand it with 2 new sections to bring that date range through to the end of apartheid in 1994. So making the collection a really comprehensive look at the apartheid period from start to finish. So as Nick says, Apartheid South Africa uses records from the British government, sourced from the National Archives, to examine the UK's position and role during apartheid, casting light on Britain's extremely close links with South Africa. So Britain was South Africa's largest trading partner and was a major source of foreign investment. And previously, South Africa has been a British colony, a dominion, and a member of the Commonwealth. In addition to this, South Africa frequently presented itself as a kind of bastion against communism in Southern Africa, often accusing its opponents in the liberation movement and in Southern Africa as being communist. And so in the broader context of the Cold War, the British government, with its kind of ideological position, had many reasons to protect and support South Africa on the international stage. So while this collection has to be seen through the lens of the British government and through the lens of British diplomats, that really close relationship between the 2 nations means that there was a lot of interplay and correspondence between the 2 countries. And so these files will allow you to study a really broad range of topics, including sanctions and embargoes, humanitarian issues, opportunities and support for Black South Africans in the UK, reports on segregated society in South Africa, and business links between the UK and South Africa. Now, if I go in and focus a little bit more onto this latest module, so we've decided to return to the collection after that very long hiatus because as we're coming up to the 30th anniversary of the end of apartheid in 1994, the National Archives has actually started to release previously restricted documents that were that have not been available before, and which offer a first-hand account of the latter years of apartheid. So this latest module, Resistance, Sanctions and Reform, focuses on the tumultuous period of 1981 to 1988, which was exemplified by a new phase of resistance and opposition to apartheid. The extremely limited and unpopular reforms of 1983 continued to disenfranchise South Africa's Black population, placing the majority of power in the hands of the white minority. So these reforms reinvigorated opposition movements, especially with the formation in 1983 of the United Democratic Front, an umbrella organisation formed to protest against the new constitution and organise boycotts against the 1984 general election. So as these liberation movements in South Africa gained in popularity and influence, the apartheid state began to impose increasingly draconian measures to crack down on opposition. So that led to violent and protracted confrontations between state security forces and opposition activists. So this newest module then marks the kind of crux of the liberation struggle. And so to investigate this key period in apartheid history, we've digitized the full run of the National Archives FCO 105 series, which are the records of the Southern Africa Department. So those relate to South Africa, Namibia, and neighboring countries. In addition to this core material, we've taken content from a broad range of supporting series, including the Prime Minister's Office, the Treasury, the Cultural Relations Department, the United Nations Department, and the British Council. So these really built a full picture of the UK's government's position and role during apartheid South Africa. The Prime Minister's files are, I'd say, particularly interesting as they contain personal correspondence between Margaret Thatcher and South Africa's President P.W. Botha. These letters bring to light the acute policy dilemma for the UK during this period. So at once principally opposed to the policy of apartheid, but also keen to maintain those close trade and diplomatic relationships with South Africa that I mentioned before. So what can you expect from this new collection, this new section? Well, our key themes start with that broad spectrum of international opposition to apartheid, ranging from government sanctions and embargoes through to their developing grassroots activism and student protests in the UK and the US, which called for banks and businesses to divest in South African industries. The success of these movements led to a crisis in the South African economy as loss of trade and investment dried up. And these international movements were also mirrored by a resurgence in mass popular opposition against the apartheid regime within South Africa itself, again with the formation in 1983 of the United Democratic Front, and as groups such as the ANC and its militarized wing, Umkhonto we Sizwe, stepped up campaigns of sabotage against government targets with the aim of making apartheid ungovernable. So in response to that international and internal pressure, South Africa's President P.W. Botha recommitted to the policy of apartheid in 1985 with his so-called Rubicon speech, and subsequently began imposing kind of restrictions against opposition groups using state of emergency legislation to empower South Africa's security forces. So to investigate these key themes, we've provided a wide range of government material, so heavily featuring correspondence between diplomats and government ministers. We've got parliamentary records, international meetings and UN resolutions, and memos detailing policy. But you also have extensive reports from Foreign Office agents on the ground in South Africa and in neighbouring countries, reporting back to the Foreign Office. You've got reports from non-government organisations such as Amnesty International, the United Nations and the IMF. You've got discussions with anti-apartheid activists and leaders of the key movements, which really highlight the liberation struggle. You've got newspaper clippings and ephemera. They give a comprehensive look at the reaction to key events. My personal favourite, you've got annotations and notes scribbled in the margins of documents by Foreign Office staff, which mark their initial reactions and which really bring the collection to life. So just to give you an example, my favourite is a biographical report from a diplomat in Botswana, which mentioned his daughter played the piano, and someone has written in the margin saying, "So does mine." It's just a kind of, you get to know the characters within the Foreign Office, which is really exciting. And alongside the primary sources, there's a broad range of secondary content to contextualize the documents and support a broad range of users, from those who are kind of subject experts through to those who are new to the topic or using primary sources for the first time. So we've got a chronology and a map gallery to help situate the primary sources within the broader context. We've got a whole host of essays and video discussions, including a fantastic essay from Matt Graham, our third speaker for today. So he wrote about the sporting boycotts that culturally isolated South Africa during this period, and about the British athletes who bypassed those bans. And I'm particularly excited about the two video discussions between Heidi Brooks at the University of Witwatersrand and Seppo Molloy at the University of Johannesburg, where they were discussing their key research interests and how they use primary sources to investigate the organisation of the ANC and anti-apartheid activists at a local level, outside of their kind of big man focus that looks only at key figures like Nelson Mandela or Oliver Tambo. And Nick mentioned that AM Archives Direct is really typified by extensive metadata that he showed you before. And for this latest module, we've expanded our metadata generation process with new named entity recognition and topic modeling technologies. And as Nick said, it's fully searchable using OCR technology. And we've got a searching guide that suggests pathways into the primary sources and how to use those searching tools to find hidden narratives or marginalized voices. So I know I spoke a lot on that last page. Sorry, I just need to go back one slide. If I can't go back, it's fine. I just wanted to kind of end with 4 key reasons why we're so excited about this new addition to Apartheid South Africa. So the first is that newly released material that has not been available in the National Archives until quite recently. So this digitization project makes it much more widely accessible to people who probably haven't had a chance to visit it in the archive yet. This is also a really great opportunity to look at kind of international politics, both at the wider government level and in kind of intergovernment organizations like the UN, but also kind of at a grassroots level with that broad activist level, grassroots activism. And also, this year marks the 30th anniversary of that, of the end of apartheid. So this collection will also offer another look at all the influences that led into the liberation negotiations, and also possibly a chance to look at the ANC and the administration of South Africa following the end of apartheid. That is everything I've got for you. So thank you very much, everyone.
So while I just wait for my screen to take control, I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone on the call for coming along, giving up a bit of your day to hear a bit about the collection, but also about what I do in my teaching as well. So what I'm going to do in this very brief presentation is talk to you a little bit about how I've used this collection for a student assignment in one of the modules that I teach at the University of Dundee. And I'll give you a sense about how I have framed it and also use it I've kind of used the term here, become a historian, but to allow students to really feel like they're becoming a historian. We'll talk a little bit about the kind of developmental and learning outcomes of this, and also a bit about my experiences and the things that I might do differently in the future. Now, I think as we've already heard from both Alex and Nick, is that this collection is a fantastic resource. And obviously for kind of academic researchers, there is a plethora of information available to them. But I think equally, this is a fantastic opportunity for all the educators on the call to think about how they can use this in their teaching and how it can be used to allow for greater student opportunity through particularly assignments. Now, I think a key element of this is the equity of access to resources. And by this, I mean is that based at the University of Dundee in Scotland, we're about 6 hours away from London and the National Archives. So before really having access to these materials, it's actually really quite difficult for our students to get a feel for the materials on South Africa and about the ways in which they could interpret that material. So having access to this means that they don't need to leave the campus, they don't need to leave Dundee, but it also gives them that equality of access. And as you've seen from some of the pictures on the previous presentations, is that these are the whole collections. These are the files that the students can navigate through. And I'm not going to go over all the different bits of documentation and aspects there are to the collection. As we already heard, diplomatic reports, minutes, statistics, propaganda, what have you. But it means that then there is this comprehensive collection of materials that students can access and utilize in different ways. Furthermore, like in my classes, we make sure that primary sources are the kind of the bedrock of the analytical discussions. And we're drawing materials in from like South Africa, but also from all over the world. And obviously, the National Archives and the British collection are a key aspect of that. And so what I can do is I can quickly go on to the collection, pull resources out, or send out links to the students. So again, that within the classroom, these materials act as a focal point for discussion and also debate around particularly historiographical issues that we might be talking about from week to week. As Nick has also very kindly shown you, is actually how easy it is to use this collection. So again, the keyword searches are particularly useful, but what I do at the beginning of the semester is ensure that I get the collection up on the big screen in the classroom, and I give a little training session. So we can talk through the ways in which the collection can be used. The students can have a go before I talk about the assignment in a minute or two. But basically, I just really want to reiterate just how easy it is to use, which then makes the lives of educators, but also the students much, much simpler too, which I think everyone would agree is a good thing. Also, I think that as we've heard again from Alex and Nick, is that this is the British state's official archive. And it gets the students thinking about the nature of archival materials. Now, at the same time, we've got to really think about, what is the purpose of that archive? Why were those materials kept? What are the narratives that are reflected within those materials? And also, again, as has already been said, is that Britain was an ally of the South African state, and it reflects some of those themes. But I think also crucially, it gets the students to think about that information in an analytical and critical way. They can actually think about why that material exists. What does it tell us about the apartheid government? But also, what are those stories of resistance? Because although this might be the British perspective, there are still these nuggets that can be derived from that. There is also the reporting on the various movements that were resisting against apartheid, and also, they can put into practice some of the theoretical things that we talk about in class about decolonial practices, reading against the grain to identify alternative narratives or even those silences that actually exist within those archives. So some really great points from this collection that can be used in the teaching. Now, I've called this assignment Becoming a Historian. I don't actually tell my students that this is the title of it, but basically this is the process of what they are doing. And just to give you a little bit of context, so I teach a module called Apartheid, African Liberation and Democracy, and that this is at level 4 in the Scottish system. So in Scotland, we have a 4-year undergraduate degree program, so it's in their final set of modules before they graduate. So the students are asked at the end of the semester to basically create an independent project. So they are asked to look at online databases, to think about a concept or a theme that they really want to investigate, and to create a mini project based on those sources. So they are asked to identify at least 8 different primary sources. So these could be documents or minutes, maps, pictures, what have you. And these are from the databases that they have access to. And after kind of analyzing and kind of collating the materials themselves, they are asked to write a 2,500 word analysis of those materials in the context of the literature. And this assignment comes at the end of the semester, so that they have all of the module themes to consider. They will have been to tutorials, thought about the reading, thought about the debates. So they can then put that learning across the semester into practice with this assignment. And as has already been kind of hinted at, but there is a huge array of topics that can be looked at through the materials. And here are just 4 that really focused on the apartheid collection, which I think give you a sense of that variety. Now, one that I thought was a really excellent project was considering the ways in which apartheid South Africa created segregation. Now, apartheid at its very essence was segregating everybody within South Africa, but they also went about creating the apartheid infrastructure that segregated cities and also urban spaces in particular. And so the student looked at apartheid official government documents, looked at the official mind in some ways of the apartheid government to see how they had conceptualized this process. And then they use some other sources, use the historiography to challenge that and to think about how that existed, what were the tensions about essentially removing people from urban spaces to create essentially white-only areas. Another student focused on Grand Apartheid. Now, this was the big plan of the apartheid government to segregate all of South Africa into different kind of homelands where different ethnic groups were essentially deported or forced towards to create essentially a majority white South Africa and then these so-called independent homelands. And again, using the maps, using the official documentation, the student was able to actually kind of chart the incoherence within the apartheid government's own official thinking and actions as well, which again I thought was a really nice way of using the materials and thinking about actually how that played out, but also the legacies and impacts from that. Now, those were about kind of the apartheid state more broadly, but we've also got 2 other examples. Another one was on the youth protests that emerged in the kind of late 1960s, right through into the 1970s. And again, the student was looking at the kind of the campus resistance across South Africa, the way in which university students and then later school children fought back. And again, looking at the way in which this was being reported by British officials, the newspapers, but also again by the South African state as well. And so again, able to chart kind of key figures like Steve Biko and about how that was reported and reflected within the official government documentation. And finally, during the 1950s, in the initial years after the National Party took power in 1948, is that there was enormous resistance to the implementation of white minority rule in the form of apartheid. I should say that white minority rule existed for hundreds of years previously. But in this decade, there was an outpouring of resistance, particularly things like the Defiance Campaign, the Treason Trial. And again, the student was able to use the documentation to show these forms of resistance, the panic that was within the apartheid government at this resistance, and then also to look at the ways in which they clamped down on those. So those are 4 samples from, I could have picked loads and I haven't got enough time tonight to talk to you about them, but I thought those 4 give you a really nice essence of the variety of topics that can be covered and the ways in which this collection can be used to kind of enable students to focus on particular topics. And with any kind of assignment, we really do need to think, obviously, about what is the pedagogic kind of like the value. What are you getting out of this? What is the purpose of it? And I think the collection and the assignment itself, about about prioritizing and premising primary sources here, allows the students to kind of put into practice a lot of the skills they've developed across their degree. So this is about coming up with a research question, doing a little literature review, identifying the source materials, placing it within the kind of broader academic ecosystem, and also then kind of actually writing the thing itself. And it does, and I've got a quote to kind of back this up as a good historian, I've got some evidence, but the students kind of gain some of those practical experiences of being, or what we do as professional historians. So the files look exactly the same as if you were in the National Archives. You open up and you have the initial folios and all the documentation details at the front. You also experience both the frustrations and the joys of actually opening a file and maybe not finding what you want, but then later finding out something that you do want. And again, I think that's really a really valuable experience for the students. So they're taking all those skills I just mentioned previously, but also getting to see these full runs of collections of materials to then adapt and build through that. I think most importantly is the idea of autonomy. And this is something that I really try to instill in a lot of my teaching and a lot of the assignments that I put on. If the students can take ownership of it, then they are so much more likely to get better results or excellent results because they have chosen the topic. They've had that freedom to do really what they want to do within the broader framework of the module and the topic itself. But it allows them to, again, pursue things that they're interested in and identify particular themes that might actually sit out with the actual teaching that we do. I think that's a really important aspect of it, that autonomy, that freedom to pursue particular topics. I've also had several students who've used this database as the starting point for their future dissertations through this assignment. They do the assignment, and then it gives them the practical skills, the knowledge of the database, what's there, what's in the collections, what isn't in the collections, and use the assignment to then think about what they can do for their final project before they graduate. So again, giving them that essentially a leg up into the next stage of their academic journey. And also, it's part of a broader kind of transferable skills, like using these databases, using these collections as an excellent form of research, but also learning to use the search engines in particularly novel ways. So there is an array of benefits, both for me as an educator, because I get to read really interesting and insightful projects, but also for the students themselves, as they get to put into practice various skills and also pursue things that they're super interested in. So I'm not going to go into detail about all of these quotes, but I'm just going to give you, but they kind of back up a lot of the things that I've already said. And these were taken from the last semester when I did the little kind of end of term review, essentially. But again, those key themes I've just mentioned, this idea of the freedom to do what they want. The module has an essay which has set questions, but it breaks out of that mold. They're also surprised at just the comprehensive nature, the breadth of information in the collections, to actually think, well, this could be quite obscure, but actually I've been able to pursue it and I've been able to do something really interesting. So another student here talks a bit about the way in which that quality of access to information and also the base of the dissertation. Another one has also explicitly mentioned the idea of using the theoretical concepts that we previously have taught them and putting those into action, particularly these kind of decolonial lenses and opportunities. And also, finally, again, a student said it made them feel like a real historian, which made me feel very happy because that is the entire purpose of the project. So to sum up, again, I could talk all night about this, so I will keep it very, very brief, is that I think the collection gives a great starting point for students accessing to the topic. Now, for the vast majority of people taking my class, is they will probably have had very little knowledge of South African history. They may have heard of Mandela, they may have heard of apartheid, but actually, I really try to get them immersed into the history, the culture of the country. And so therefore, I'm really, really keen to use these kind of collections, these primary sources, to show not only what's happening in South Africa, but also out with South Africa too. Britain had numerous links to South Africa. I mean, your fun fact for the day is that Dundee was one of the few cities in the UK that gave Nelson Mandela the freedom of the city. And because of that, Nelson Mandela was given a lifetime membership to Dundee University's student union. We have no proof that he actually came here to take up on the free pints that he was probably able to have, but it shows you those connections, and the collection allows you to see those things in different ways. I've been using this collection probably now for 5 or 6 years as a basis of a kind of an assignment. And when I first started it, I took for granted actually what the students knew or how they might use the database. And some of the feedback was that, well, you didn't really show us what you could do, or didn't give us the broader framework of what the module outcomes might be. So I've refined, like any good educator, refined my approach, thinking about the instructions, about the way in which I presented the material. Also doing kind of what Nick did, but in a bit more detail, showing you how to use them, how to use a database, how to search for things, and just kind of really put the students' kind of minds at ease. Because while I've just said that autonomy is a fantastic thing, is that a lot of students get set assignments throughout their university degree. So actually to kind of take the shackles off and then allow them to do what they want can be a bit daunting. So it's reassuring them, it's allowing them to see the potential of the database, and then put into practice many of those skills I've already talked about. And ultimately, and this is the thing that I think is the most important aspect of it, is that the quality of work that they produce is by and large excellent. And also the variety of topics that I get to read are superb. It means that I'm not just looking at the same thing over and over again. And also it really gives you a sense of what the students became interested in, about the topics that they want to focus on. And so again, it gives you a much more holistic picture of the history and also of those student interests. So as I think I've probably talked for too much, but that's that. Obviously, if anyone has any questions, we have a Q&A, but also if anyone wants to email me and ask me about these materials at another point, I'm more than happy to help out. So thank you very much.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Matt, Alex, and Nick. Like Matt said, we have a little under 20 minutes for questions. So if you haven't put a question into the Q&A yet, feel free to do so. Okay, looks like we have a question in from Doreen, who asks, I think this is for Matt. You told students to use more than one database. What other databases did they use?
Okay, yeah. So, for example, the University of Witwatersrand has the historical papers. So a very similar kind of setup. So they're able to use basically the digitalized materials in that collection. So there's that. There is the Struggles for Freedom, which is through JSTOR. Again, that's a kind of collection of like anti-apartheid materials and also stuff from the various liberation movements, but that encompasses all of Southern Africa, so like Angola, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and South Africa. And then there is also the anti-apartheid movement's own archive, which is available online. And then there is the South African History Archive as well, which has digitalized materials too. So those are the kind of broader kind of collections. But so the AM1 is a core aspect of what we use.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, we have another question that came in from Bert, who asks, to what extent does this collection include material from British intelligence agencies,
MI6.
Yeah.
MI6? Yep.
One of us, Nick, do you want to?
I could try. So, well, with the caveat that I don't know in detail, I would be very surprised if there was anything from either of those organizations in that material. MI6 didn't officially exist until relatively recently. GCHQ is the UK government's intelligence communications centre, a bit like Fort Meade. So again, I'd be very surprised, but Alex, you might conceivably know a bit more than me about that. Boss will certainly tell it, you know, yeah. But as a topic, but yeah.
No, I don't know if we have anything specific from like government agencies or anything. I would, again, as Nick says, I doubt it. But you know, diplomat is a thing, and some of the people who may be reporting from the Foreign Office may be kind of agents in a kind of broader sense, and even the kind of actual official diplomats who are there to as ambassadors for the UK are very in touch with what's going on in the ground. They're attending events, they're talking to a broad range of people, they are collecting intelligence, even if it's not specifically for one of the kind of official agencies. So even if you're not getting that content from as Nick says, MI5 or MI6, you're still getting a lot of intelligence in a sense.
Okay, great. Another question for Matt from Catherine. How much time did you have to take out of your teaching sessions for the training aspect, i.e. giving them clear instructions for use? And do you have to do refreshers on this to keep reminding students how to use it?
Okay, so that's a great question. So during the semester, I have 4 hours a week tutorial time with my students. So I would probably spend about half an hour doing the training aspect of that usually in week 2 of the semester. So it's not a huge amount of time. I have also got a little video clip of myself on our virtual learning environment, where again I have all the instructions there. So some brief written instructions, but also some a video of me kind of going through the collection, showing them what to do and how to do it. So again, that takes a bit up of my time, but that's kind of essentially preloaded before the module actually begins. And then usually I remind the students of the materials that are available to them and that the video exists on the virtual learning environment about week 9, week 10 of the semester. So in terms of the training is quite brief. I think actually because the search engine is so user-friendly, it doesn't really take very much time. And particularly if you're using the kind of the keyword searches aspect of it, that really does kind of focus where they can go within that broader collection. And yeah, by me having some stuff in the virtual learning environment, it's always there as a additional reminder. But yeah, 4 hours a week might sound a decent chunk to have with students, but actually it really isn't. So yeah, half an hour feels about right during the semester.
Okay, great, thank you. And then kind of a follow-up to that maybe Alex and Nick could answer. Do Archives Direct databases include support on how students can use the material or guides on where to start?
Yes, I can take that. Yes, so there are. I didn't feel really I had time to go into this in my little presentation, but yeah, there are various secondary, I suppose, contextualizing aids for students in all the Archives Direct resources. Most of them will include at least one, but often multiple contextual essays, which take dives into various aspects of the sources which are presented, or to contextualize them and to suggest research pathways. Increasingly, we have video essays, so essentially interviews with academics in the field who fill the same purpose. There is a searching guide to give tips on how you might conduct searches and browsing. Come to that. And there is a list of popular searches. So searches which we know are going to be common among researchers, students, researchers using the material, and which can be presented in a list, split up into like the metadata, people's places and people, places and topics, which you can just browse and click through, and that does the search for you. So yeah, quite a reasonable number of aids in that sense. Alex, do you want to, if I missed anything out, do you want to add anything to that?
No, just to say, you said people, places and topics, and we have one extra metadata term for Apartheid South Africa 19, this latest module at least, which is organisations, and that's a really key way to investigate the really key organisations in this period.
That is true. I'm stuck in the past with my metadata, I'm afraid.
Okay, great. Thank you both. And then we have another question for Matt from Allison. Were any of the students uncomfortable about researching this wide-ranging topic, apartheid? Were they given any additional supports, and how do you approach that in like mental health support, et cetera, et cetera?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. Okay, so I mean, before the semester begins, anyway, there is a lot of discussion about what apartheid actually meant, what its impacts were, and its ongoing legacies too. And there are obvious warnings that I provide throughout the module about some of the things they might experience, and also some of the images that we use as well. So there are essentially warnings throughout the module to ensure that students are aware of this. But as a historian, it's this all happened, and so we have and also the kind of the having the wealth of archival materials that are available to them, and particularly because it's a 20th century thing, there's lots of videos and stuff like that. So there are lots of warnings throughout the module about the impact this had, and to really emphasize the impact that apartheid had on the people of South Africa. So that is front and center. When they are doing the assignment, so I kind of mentioned it, but I kind of glossed over it, is that they have to write like a mini proposal. So they come up with an idea about what they want to do, and then I'll discuss it with them about what that might entail, what they might find, and also again allow them to think a bit more about whether they actually want to do that or not, because it is not it's not a comfortable history of South Africa, and there is also a lot of violence within that, both from the apartheid state and also from the various movements resisting against apartheid. So there is the whole module has that kind of premise where we try to make sure that they understand what this means, and to ensure that if there are problems or like they are experiencing problems, that I'm there to help them and talk them through it. So that's part of the module more broadly. But it's a really good question, because I think actually, yes, some of the topics they can focus on. I know I haven't used the latest edition, the 1980s one, but that would become much more prevalent by the mid 1980s as the kind of state of emergency and the kind of the township and urban revolts occur from about 85 onwards. So from next year, when I start using all 4 collections, then that will definitely be part of that as well. So yeah, but no, it's a really good question, because I think it's something that students have to be aware of, and something to think about about the nature of the topics that they're actually covering.
Great,
just
thank
quickly
you.
jump in and answer this from kind of our perspective, because this is, again, that mental health question is something that we consider as we go through and index and catalogue this data or these kind of documents. And we, as Matt says, this latest section gets into that period where things are really becoming more and more intense, and there is a lot of uncomfortable material within this latest collection. So we do have a kind of content warning across the site to let people know that there may be uncomfortable subjects. And if there's something very specific that we've seen within a document, we may choose to add a specific content warning within the metadata to flag that up. But again, that's not been done consistently across all the documents. It's just where we've seen something that we know is particularly distressing, I'd say.
Great, thank you both. Okay, the few more minutes. There's a question from Elizabeth, who says, I may have missed this, but I'm curious as to how your materials from the UK National Archives relate to official publications, for example, Hansard parliamentary debates, etc.
So that's a good question. So the enormous majority of what's in the National Archives and material that we take from the National Archives is unpublished. So as I've said, we're talking about all sorts of documents generated mainly by the British government, which have been retained and then put into archival files in the National Archives. So the publications that Elizabeth mentions do occasionally turn up as part of those files. So there might be extracts from Hansard or white papers, command papers, legislation. They will pop up in files sort of ad hoc, depending on what the file is about. But the enormous majority of what's in them is unpublished. Assorted documents of one sort or another. I think that answers that.
Okay, great. And another question for Matt from Catherine. Is there support for students who don't have great digital literacy and/or accessibility issues? I've noticed recently, first and second year undergraduates I teach are not using laptops in seminars as much. So are there concerns about balancing growing digital teaching with individual student pressures?
That's, again, a really good question. So in my experience at the University of Dundee is that pretty much no student turns up to class without a laptop. So actually, in terms of that digital literacies within our classrooms here, is that we've not really had that problem. Although the issue that we've really struggled against is that they just go straight to Google. Like if it's not on Google, then it doesn't exist essentially, or not if it's not in the first 5 hits on Google, actually, even then. So it's actually getting them to think about how to use like Boolean searches. What are the keywords? How do you actually use that databases? So in terms of the actual infrastructure, all of our students have some access to that. How they use it is the different thing. But one thing we've been very specific in across the degree program at the University of Dundee is to build those digital literacies about how to use those search engines, how to look in the right places, because they're not that great at it. And so it's about trying to think about the ways in which they can search effectively, research effectively, and actually kind of avoid them wasting their time, really. So to answer half of that question is no, I haven't had that experience in my own classrooms. But we are having to work with how they use their laptops or their devices. And that is part of the training that I provide, but it's also provided also through the library at my institution. And also we try to make sure that there is opportunities from first year right through to 4th year.
Great. And Alex and Nick, are there any AM digital literacy tools, or is that just more embedded into how accessible and user-friendly the platforms and collections are?
I think I wouldn't say we had digital literacy tools as such. Apart from, as I say, the various bits and pieces in each website, which are devoted to helping people use that site most effectively.
Yeah, but as kind of Sabrina alluded to, kind of accessibility is built into the collections all the way from the kind of platform development all the way through to production work that we're doing on the front end and publication. But we do consider accessibility all the way through.
Okay, great. And I think we're about at the end of time, and just a bunch of people saying thank you for answering all these questions. And I'll echo our attendees and say thank you to Matt, Nick, and Alex for taking the time to speak with us today. And thank you to our attendees for your questions and your comments. I'd like to remind our viewers that we did record today's program, so be on the lookout for a follow-up email from Choice and ACRL with a link to the recording. Also, if you have a few minutes after the presentation to fill out a brief survey, we would really appreciate it. So thanks again to all of you out there for joining us. We hope you learned something new from the webinar and hope to see you again in the future on another session.